Hey, welcome to episode 127 in this series where I am programming an NES game from scratch. Sorry that the releases have been a little bit inconsistent. I was feeling under the weather and just not great in general, and I did do an episode on Monday, which was not one of my best. Just kind of slogged through it, but I was obviously exhausted and not feeling great. Still kind of dealing with some sort of respiratory thing, but feeling better. Getting back to myself. So I figured we need to keep going. We need to keep getting this code done and keep working on the game. So when we left off last time, we had successfully changed the code so that it now is, in addition to outputting the x and y coordinates of the enemy objects, it is now also providing whether or not the object is visible. If there is a spawn sprite ID, so the ID of the sprite that we want it to spawn, if it is a non-visible sprite, like a spawn point on the map, for example, and then the number of things that we want to spawn, and finally the amount of delay in frames. So the frame rate is a constant based on if we're doing PAL or NTSC, with PAL being 50 frames, NTSC being 60. But there may be a better way to do that. I don't know. That's just what we're doing right now. And I had mentioned last time we do the multiply before the divide because we're not using floating point for this and we don't want to lose the precision, so we multiply first. Anyway, so now we're outputting that information. And the next thing we got to do is we got to fix the way that the entity draw code is being handled, because we'd made some changes to the entity code in the last few sessions. So let's look at the differences here. And the main thing just comparing this. So this is the one we know works. That's the one we know works. And then in the assets export folder, we have our exported one, and there were some differences, and the differences were because of changes that we made to the way that the core game is working. So as we talked about, projectiles and objects were split into two different types of things because there was less data required for the projectiles. But as a consequence of this, we need to change the way that we are specifying our type in the code that we are generating. So let's fix that. So we want to similarly have something called entity struct name. That will work the same way as what we're doing where are we making that change? Type. And then, let's see, for this is the same because entity itself is the same, so that's good. And then we had changed the maximum name, instead of being max and total entities, we had changed it to U-bound or upper bound of projectiles and entities, so we need a thing for that. So let's do that. So this is all just kind of cleaning up the manual work we were doing here, because I had sort of taken a shortcut of manually generating these changes, but now we're at a point where we gotta make this work properly, right? So that's comparing against, that was total entities, so yeah. So that's that. This whole, let's see. So max entities is still used. We're gonna look at how this is all changed. Funny thing, you know, you start feeling kind of sick and it can take a long time to manifest, and it kind of hit suddenly and then seemed to kind of clear up a little bit and then wouldn't go away. All right, so so here is the code we're doing to kind of reset things between our lists, and we got to change it to that code. Okay, so that's this over here. So let's get rid of, well, we can leave this for now. We're just gonna kind of put this all here and then remove my mistakes. All right, so let's see what we got here. So that is just our code with the comment there. I'm going to leave that comment because that was pretty useful, I think, to keep in. I think it's going to save us anytime we make any changes later on from trying to remember why things work the way they work. Let's get rid of those old lines that we don't need anymore. All right, so that is our loop reset code. This, oh, is that a bug? Oh no, that's just a change. Okay. Entity struct name. Okay, so that's changing it to look at the struct name, size of that total there, and then the compare to max entities should be max projectiles. We'll just make this a whole. I'm not calling it that. I just this thing. Max name 2. All right. Just wasn't happy with that because I wasn't consistent in the naming. All right, so that would be max projectiles here, max projectiles, okay. And then for this one, it should just be max entities, like I believe it was before. Okay. The structs will have been changed. All this jazz is changed. So I think we're good there. Let's just double check. That's there. Okay, so what we can do now is just rerun the export and refresh kdiff 3. Let it tell us what's changed. What's going on? At some point, I'm just going to have to buy myself a license of Beyond Compare. Sorry, I'm shifting the microphone here for a second. Just because it's a much... I mean, kdiff 3 is okay, but Beyond Compare is a really nice tool. That's what I use at work. Just F5. Okay. All right, so that one's still wrong. Those are still wrong. Why? Aha. So that's that. That's the one. That's one that's wrong there. Draw entities. I think that's all the same. We just run that and refresh. No? What? Oh. Scope, entity, projectiles, drawing. Yeah, load a projectiles. Entity. Type. Entity struct name. Oh. I reversed it. And so then oops. Scratch it. Reverse. Okay, refresh. Okay, there is an edge case here with something. Okay, here, this should be entity struct name. No, that's not the one. Okay, that was a change that needed to be made, so that's good. We'll eventually get all of them here. There it is. I imagine there is probably at least one more, but let's see. Well, looks like we maybe got it. All right, let's run that and compare. Okay, so it's still max projectiles, and that's wrong. And then what else? Why are you saying that that's different? Load A, entity start. Just the spacing. Okay, I don't care about that. I do care that the comment is directly after. Okay, transfer AX, that's fine. That's good. Alright, so compare X U-bound entities. Entity U-bound name. So what's the deal with that? Did I not... Oh. All right, let's see where we're at here. Okay, so these are non-functional changes. They're just like white space or something that got changed. That's good. And then... So this is... Okay, so this is the code that's being done for the entities only right now. This was because of the Flickr code that we wrote. So if you recall, we are generating this code to determine what's the next entry in our list of entities that needs to be started at, because if we have a bunch of empty slots in the entity list, then we end up not changing the draw order. I still have to try out that algorithm that the doc sent over, because it looked like it would work pretty well, but I didn't actually give it a shot yet. So let's go back here for a moment. Where is that crap? Okay, so we have something called entity loop. All right, so let's do this just for the entity right now. If any entity loop is 0, okay. So otherwise, same drill here. One too many. And then, right, we just got to add that in to close out those lines. And then hopefully when I repaste this, it will be magically formatted. Yes. All right, so that, let's get this spacing working properly so that we've got our comments aligned. Not that it's super important, but I like that when we're looking at ASM. Makes it easier to read. Okay, so that all looks good. This is only for the objects right now, so we don't have to substitute these yet. Probably want to do that at some point, but for the projectiles, but it's not important enough to do right this second. I really want to get that. Excuse me. I really want to get that the non-visible things spawning properly. All right. So what is this doing? This code needs to be moved. Is there a label in this? There is not a label here, but there should now be a label. Done finding next start. Oh, it's right here. Okay, so that's fine. So that just needed to be shifted because of the new code that we added. This is all okay, except that's not okay. Some of the spacing got messed up by the when we pasted it in here. Again, obviously not super important to what we're doing, but just want to try and eliminate errors by making this match as best as possible. Alright, so let's go back up to the top differences. So this now... Oh, I see what happened. So that's not going to work there. Okay. I forgot that this actually has to happen beforehand for this part of the loop. So what we'll do is we'll move this into here, and okay. All right, let's take a look at this code now. So that is a spacing difference. That is also a spacing difference. Also spacing. That all looks good except for this label, which doesn't need the tab. Also spacing, but sort of a more important thing. Okay, so we're generating this drawing code now properly the way that I wanted to. So now we can, well, now we can really break things by bringing this into the game. What? Enemy 0.pal doesn't exist? Why is it looking for it in here? That's weird. Alright, well, we'll have to figure that one out later. I've got a few copies of this, but just in case, let's make one more, because we're about to overwrite that. So let's replace those files. Do a make, and we know that this is broken, right? Because we made this change to the way that the objects are stored for the enemies, and so what we should get is maybe the first thing happens correctly, but the second one won't. We should get some sort of weird behavior for the second enemy that's on the map. Actually, are there two? I don't even remember. There are. Okay. So we're at the point where they should have spawned, but it looks like didn't even spawn. Okay. So let's go take a look at our 6502 and why that is. The good news is it's not quite as broken as I thought it might be, so that's exciting. Okay, so now we need to handle how we're going to process this in the game engine. So Y is the enemy. Okay. What order did we do these bytes in? So the X, the Y, the visible, well, actually it's the ID, the X, and the Y. So in T1 we store the type, in T2 we get the X position, in then we have the Y position, and we compare it to the camera Y position, the lower portion of the byte, and then if that is not a match, then we jump because we're done. Otherwise, we continue to check. What was it trying to do here? Oh, right. So it's getting the next byte of the Y position, comparing it, and then object confirmed. Let's see if that is actually being called still. I'd be curious to know if we're even getting to the point where we're trying to spawn the thing. We are. Okay, cool. Let's go back to this for a second. All right, so the enemy index is what is the enemy index? It is value 0. Okay, yeah. And then let's see. T1 is the type. Value is 0. The X is 26. Huh. So there's two objects. Entity type is 0, X, Y, visible. Sprite ID, number of items, frames. Next thing, sprite ID. Okay, so is that right though? Let's take a look at the code. I guess I should have looked at this. So we're not getting any... We're getting no entity for the thing, which isn't technically correct. I mean, it is an actual entity, it just has no visible type, and it's also not therefore adding it to the list of sprites. That means, let's take a look when we do the export here. Oops. For a second. So the export ID is 0. I mean, we don't need an actual image for this thing. But we need a type to represent it that isn't 0. Unless we do something where... Well, no, because the type is also going to be necessary for handling the logic of the thing. Alright, so let's go back for a minute here to where the export ID is getting set. So it's never getting called for that thing, which kind of makes sense. What is this? So we do have it in this list. Add this to our watch here for a moment. We'll see that we're going to iterate through it. And it has a GID of 3, so it's not a non-object. It's not an empty entry, essentially. But the thing is that we don't have... Right, we don't have a sprite file for it. But what we should probably do Well, we don't know that it's not visible here. We know it's an object. We just know. We also just know that there's no sprite for it, so it doesn't get an export ID. Now, in here, we have the map objects, which are those two launch points. I feel like what we need to do is, after we're done here in the export process, if we have non-visible map objects that simultaneously have GIDs that correspond to the map metatiles, we need to assign them an export ID. Because even if we're not generating the imagery or any actual drawing, I don't know if that's going to work though. That might end up being problematic, because then later on we're going to look for it to export it, and then won't be able to export it because we didn't load the image for it, because the image is just a placeholder in the map. Let's see. If we go into here, if map metatiles I is object end, export ID is 0, we want to look for this in the map objects. If map objects J visible. So what we can do here actually is we could do this could be an error check, where basically if we've got something that's a sprite that didn't get mapped to an export ID, and when we looked at the map object itself, it is visible, then there's a problem, right? We shouldn't continue because the thing is mapped to a sprite that should be seen but has no correlating or corresponding sprite. Just wanted to check how we're exiting out of here, if there's problems. I don't even know if we are. As I said the last time, this has kind of grown into a little bit of a mess, and there are some things we can do to simplify and reduce the amount of looping and kind of crazy stuff we're doing, but for now I just want to get it, keep it working. Invisible sprite was not mapped to an export ID, and let's give the name and then the new line and then map metatiles I. And just return, I don't remember if this, yeah, this returns false, and then that'll fail out, and And then we need to add another bracket there. Okay. Oh, so yeah, the other thing is if we do this, then we have to say map objects. No, map meta tiles I export ID is equal to export ID plus plus. So we'll assign the export ID and then increment the value. Let's see where we can get to here. Okay, so let's see. Export ID 7. Wait a minute. Map object. Oh. Once we do that, we're done. Okay, so that's the end of that. And then we will continue our process of all this exporting here. Let's see, get any errors while we run this? Said it exported. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the code that we got here. So we're still not getting an entity. Those are projectiles. That's the little bit drawing, but that's fine. All right, let's go back to this is mapping the sprite name to the ID of the sprite name to the ID of the thing. So like 6 for the little bit. All right. So then we're looping through here. Okay, so that's why that's not showing up, because there is no sprite associated with the thing. In the file list. All right, well, let's cheat here because I want to prove out that this is going to work. And I don't really feel like messing with the tool right now to make that happen quite yet. Let's figure out how this is going to work here in the game. And then we'll see where we go. So, okay, so if we hit a sprite type that we don't recognize in draw entities, then we're okay. We'll just skip over it. So now, when we get to this point where the object is confirmed, we should be adding a type 7, except that we don't have any logic to handle a type 7 or process a type 7 or anything like that. But we will actually be one step closer, and what we'll need to do is then write the logic in the process loop that handles the spawning of the little bits from the type 7 logic there. But that's actually pretty straightforward. If we get to that point, then we're basically done with the struct itself for handling this. It's just going to be a question of, yep, that's type 7. Okay, cool. How do we, so going back to what I was saying, it's going to be a process of, okay, how do we fix this in this tool? Because everything is so heavily file-based, you know, and it made sense when we started working on the tool to be that way, but thinking about it now, if I had thought through, I don't know, I can't even say that. You know, maybe if I had thought through the process a little bit more, I would have come up with something that wasn't so heavily dependent on the files, but I don't know that that's true. So, it's lowercase launch. All right, so we've got our definition here for processing the launch type now. Let's go into that little bit code, because that's sort of what we want for the launch. Actually, we could just copy this whole thing. Right? It's not exactly right, but... And then we'll have to change this code to handle... What was this doing? Oh, checking player collision. Let's still do this because we do want it to check the player collision. Let's just do a simple... we can even just increment it. Right now, I just want to sort of differentiate between the things, the little bit, and then this launch piece. So. One other thing that we're not doing, we are not setting the data or anything like that, which we should do. So that's where these extra bytes come in. So we're writing that it's visible, the spawn ID of the thing we want to spawn. I don't know if we actually need that it's visible as a byte that we write out, thinking about this now, because if we just don't have code for drawing, then it's just inherently not visible, and this is kind of redundant. Let's get rid of that byte. Let's save that byte. It's not about the space savings necessarily, but if we don't need to use it, let's not. And the main thing that changed here, obviously, is we gotta add that back in. Okay, so we've added the object, and then T1 is the index that just came out of the thing. Okay. So T1 has the value of the index of the thing that just came out, so we now know where we want to set the spawn sprite ID, the count, and the timer, right? So transfer X to A, push A, load X T1. Let's load any auxiliary data about the object. So we have our data word and a timer. So that should be enough, because we will be able to load the sprite ID, the count, and then our timer count. Although, no, that's not 100% enough, because that'll let us do one. This is what we need. Spawn ID count. Although, you know, we have this Y world position, which is meaningless for the entities. Okay. That's what we're going to do. So, sorry, what was the order? Spawn ID, so load a level object data Y, store A into objects data X, right? We got our index into X, so let's, before I forget, let's pull A and transfer A back to X as part of unwinding that process. Okay, so then let's load level object data Y again. We didn't increment Y, we got to do that. So we load it again, and then we store that into objects entity data +1. And this is our number of spawned objects. And then, and granted, there are going to be things that don't have a need for those, so those will just be 0. But that's okay. That's what we want. All right, so the last thing is the frame rate, and what we want to do is we want to load the timer with the value and Y world position with the reset value. So once we hit 0, we need to know what we're counting back, starting over from. So let's put that there. Store that into objects, entity, data, timer, and again, it's because this doesn't actually matter for the doesn't really matter for anything except for the player entity. I don't think we may be able to get rid of that. Save a byte in our struct. But for now, this doubles as the reset counter for entities that spawn. And then we pull off the stack, we transfer 8 back to X, and then we increment Y and X, and then we check the object. All right, so that looks reasonable. And if that is good, then what we would be able to do here in the launch code is we would be able to decrement objects, entity, timer X, load it, branch if not equal. So if it's not 0, we're gonna skip this code. But if it is 0, then we're going to let's see, load a objects entity y world position X, store a objects entity y world position timer X. So that gets us our reset the timer, and then here's where we're actually adding the map object. So let's do the thing here. So we want to load objects entity data X because let's see, data is what we want to spawn, so that's that. We're going to, but before we do that, we should probably check to see if we're done spawning them, branch if not equal. Alright, so we are skipping the object load if we're either not at the end of our timer or we have exceeded the number of things we want spawned. We will then decrement our spawn count, load the type, load the X position, load the top of the screen Y position, and then add the map object. So that's the core of the functionality there. Now, in this part, what are we doing? Story data. We're setting the grouping, but we'll deal with that later, because right now I just want to prove out that this is actually correct. We don't care about player collision at all. We do want to destroy this thing. If the let's fix this. So we just load it to no entity and change the type, right? So okay. If we're at this position here, want to load any, what is it? Store that into the type because we're done. Okay, let's see what we have wrought. Oh, entity type. Guess I should have known that by now. Okay, so let's see what kind of mess we've created here. So far, so good. Nothing dumb is broken, so that's exciting. Oh, I missed. Pause that for a second. Didn't want that leaking. All right. So let's get to the point where we spawn the enemy. Excellent. Here's our launch code. Let's make sure we actually pop in there. We do. That's exciting. Okay. So we decrement the timer. We load it into A. Oh, that's unfortunate. The timer value is 0. That is not what I expected. So let's see why we're hitting that. Okay. So we have the object, we transfer X to A, and we push A, then we load X with T1, which has, that's good, that's 10, which is the value that was there when we were looking at it in the breakpoint just a moment ago. So if we load the level object data, the value is 2. The value is 2. Y is only 3. Let's see, so we have the enemy type, the X position, the Y position. We're not incrementing Y enough. Because Y is, let's see. Yeah, so Y needs to be incremented one more time. Because right now we're looking at the second byte of the level object data, the Y position there. So that's not what we wanted. Let's hit that breakpoint. Once we get this working, we'll swap out the ship sprite for the real sprite. Uh-oh. What happened? Did I... What? Why would that have broken it? For the one that was working. we'll shop. Sorry, we'll swap the ship sprite for the real sprite that or at least a more real sprite that we're hoping to use for the game. Is that breakpoint gone? Is that what happened? Oh, it's gone. Let's back up for a second. So it's possible that it's hitting the breakpoint still. It's just that we didn't know because it was removed due to the code changing. Oh yeah, okay. What does this look like? 3. Did I mix up my byte order here? Let's see what it thinks that. Let's go back to the code here. So once we get to the spot where it's loading the object, I have a feeling I just have the bytes out of order. That's our index. Okay. Load A. Or did I not? I wonder if did I forget? I wonder if I forgot to copy the re-exported data after we made that change. Son of a... Go away, Explorer. I almost said Finder. I have the same problem with Finder. All right. So let's rebuild this. Let's run through it one more time. Sorry to have us sit through this again. But at high speed, it's not as bad. And I've tried to place the enemy at a reasonably low spot so that we can actually have some scrolling happen without waiting too long. All right. Okay, so that's the spawn ID. So we put that in data. I guess I must not have copied the changes over or rerun the export. So, okay, so that is our number of spawn things. And then, crap, I didn't increase Y again. All right. Right, and then let's just make sure this is all matching up. So when I reset the timer, I'm grabbing it from Y world position. Data is the spawn thing. Okay, yeah, that looks right. Okay, so that was, I just didn't increment Y properly that time. Okay, so a 6 loaded 3 times. 1E is our frame counter. Okay, good. So now that's all looking good. Let's continue on. Oh, did that breakpoint get destroyed again? Darn it. Oh man, it really got pretty far. I might be better off just zipping past. Without the debugger open, it runs at 200 frames a second here, so okay. So it loads, decreases the timer. It loaded it. Branch if not equal. Okay, let's put a breakpoint here. All right, so we load the new timer value. We store it in timer. We load data +1. It is Yep. I'm an idiot. All right. Breakpoint is still there, so we should see that get called in just a moment. Okay. And we decrement how many more times we need to spawn it. We load the 6, which is our little bit. We put it into T1 and T2, and we set up the X and Y, and then we add our map object, and then we should see something actually spawn here. There we go. And now they're just looping because they don't know to die when they hit the bottom of the screen. We should be able to destroy one and get destroyed by hitting it. Great. All right, so let's... Now that was obviously at super speed, so the spacing is going to be a little bit different. What I wanted to do... I don't like that it counts off initially. Based on the timer. I want timer to just be 0. Because it should just be it should at that point be ready to roll. First one spawned immediately, so let's go to this, and it's actually got to be 1 because we do decrement once. This should be 1 so that we immediately spawn an instance. Great. Oh, what? That's weird. Okay. And obviously we need to make that ship know that it should stop at the bottom of the screen. Get rid of this breakpoint. And let's get close, and then I want to see if it actually spawns at the right interval. It should. So that, how long did we set that time for? 500. Oh, so only half a second. Let's make it 2000. And this one isn't doing anything. I'm surprised by that, but we'll see why that is later. Because it's actually pretty close to working. Minus my little hack that I have to do for introducing the entity type. Which in the grand scheme of what we're working on here could be worse. Could be like how we were manually replacing the draw routine and stuff like that. That's all been ironed out, so I feel good about that. Right, launch is not defined. I was just talking about that. Okay. Where'd you go, Messin? And let's close the debugger. Let's run at full speed here. Full steam ahead. And let's see what happens when it launches. Now, the second one might not be launching properly because of a problem. Okay, cool. That spacing is right. It was 2 full seconds before it launched the next one. And like I said, we got to fix the little bit guy there to stop when it hits the bottom of the screen. But what I'm more curious about was there is obviously, I think, a problem. Aha, that's the problem. So the enemy index is being used to calculate the Y at the start. And before we had only a few things there. We had the export, we had 4 bytes. We had the export ID, the X, and the Y. Now we have 1, 2, 3 more, so that's 7 bytes. Blah. I think I might just wait. Is that right? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Should I pad it out to? I'm gonna add visible back so that we can have 8, so I can just do an even by 2 multiplication instead of having to do no, don't be a baby. Alright, so what we need to do is so there's 7, so we need to multiply by 4 and then add. Oh, wait a minute. How are we? Oh. Let me think about this for a second. So the index is our offset into it. Yeah, I'm just gonna be lazy, and we're just gonna pad it so that I don't have to deal with this, because it's not like we're real tight on space right now. It's just easier to do one more shift than worry about the math and mess that up for the next 20 minutes. So export that again. All right, let's reload that, and then we should get both of these things spawning here correctly momentarily at different rates, and then we'll fix the ship that flies out so that it stops when it hits the bottom of the screen, and then we're done for tonight. Oh. Really? Really? You're gonna do this to me? What did I do? What did I mess up? 2, 4, 8. I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so there are 8 bytes. So if the index is load X enemy index, load A enemy index. So if the index is 0, it just shifts it and gets 0. If the index is 1, we get 8. Oh. Yeah, hello. Gotta remember to do that. We added the byte and didn't skip it because I don't know. All right, should be good now. Yeah, there they are. Cool. And you could see that they spawned different rates and also with different numbers. It was a little tough to see because they were happening simultaneously. Let's leave that one there. Let's move this one up higher. And we can even move it in a little bit more just to kind of prove that that works. Let's export the map. Okay. Regenerate that. Recopy that. We still have to figure out how we're going to make this launch thing get in there. I think we're going to have to switch over to not relying on the files for the generation of that list. And then that should take care of it. But I'm not super troubled by that right now. We can come back to that Thursday, which will be hopefully live streamed. Yeah, cool. So that moved in too. And then we should see the other one on the top right here. Let's see if we get the right number spawning. Well, actually, it's going to be hard to keep track of it if they don't go away. Where is something else that just so I don't have to think about the check at the bottom of the screen. Load Y position. So we increment that and then load it, and we need that, and let's I forgot about that. And clear the object entity that way, and then we don't need that extra label, and then we don't need this jump, and this is good. That will go till the end and then clear itself. All right, let's see if we're done for the night. Clear. Okay. So we should get 3, 2 seconds apart. 1, 2, 3. Good, and it's not looping, and it's done. And then we should, in a moment here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they were, I believe, supposed to be a second apart from one another. So let's we can back up here a moment. Yeah, yep, and that's what's defined here. 5 of them spaced a second apart, and 3 of them spaced two seconds apart. So that's working. We're good. And they disappear once they hit the bottom of the screen. Excellent. So next order of business, as I mentioned, is we got to figure out how to make the tool actually handle the launch type, so we don't have to manually hard code it in to operate properly. That will be important to moving forward to ensure that we can add any other invisible types for the purposes of having different kinds of events, just random things. These are almost like sort of event points in some way. They could trigger things to happen like anything, really. It's kind of a, right now it's limited to the spawning of items, but we could use it to trigger code, right? So we can actually make these be a little bit more, sorry, my train of thought is starting to derail here. They're limited now to spawning things, but we can use them for triggering events, and they're pretty flexible in what they offer us, which is cool. So, like I said, once we get that working in the export tool, I want to then start swapping in the real ship sprite, and we can start building some more enemies, add some more stuff to things like the little bit, which is right now just flying down, maybe have it follow a pattern. The other thing we need to do is in the launch, we need to add the code to handle the grouping. So let's do a comment here to do handle grouping of objects so that if all objects in group are destroyed, bonus. And the grouping can actually be part of this Y world position +1. Let's write that down too, because I'm going to forget. Y world position +1 can handle the group count, since that's not needed here. Okay, cool. And then once you hit, a point where that value becomes 0, when these guys get destroyed, that can trigger, some sort of bonus subroutine that will determine, should you get extra points? Should we create a special item? I don't know yet, but the point is that we need to be able to handle that, because that's going to be an important part of the way that the code works. In fact, before I forget to do this, since we're doing this, objects plus entity, y world position +1 x, stored here for tracking group destruction for bonuses, etc. We may reshuffle some of that, because right now it's just like, oh, we have space here, we can store it there, but we might have a better idea of what we want to do as we mess around with this and sort of shift around the data to make more sense. But anyway, as always, thank you for watching. If you want to reach me online, I'm on Twitter at Clairvis. I'm also on Nintendo Age as Zelius. I'm on the Discord pretty regularly, especially now that I'm feeling better. And you can feel free to post comments or questions to the video below in YouTube, and email me if you have any questions. I've gotten emails and comments, and definitely glad that people are enjoying these videos and getting something useful out of them. If you are getting something useful out of them, feel free to take a look at my Patreon and my Buy Me a Coffee. That's, you just get some sort of nice bonus things if you do the Patreon. I've posted a few things that are extras for patrons. And if you decide that you don't want to do any of those things, but you do want to pre-order the game, you get access to the source code, although I need to update it. It is a little bit out of date compared to where we are now, but I will get that updated soon here. And I will just keep putting out this content and kind of showing how you make an NES game. So anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great night. See you Thursday for the live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern. I hope you join me, and we can chat about this, gaming, retro gaming, whatever you want. So have a good night. Take care, and thanks. Bye.